The list was nailed beside the camp office after morning roll call, and most prisoners passed it without stopping until Otto Weber saw his own name written among the dead. He touched the paper with one shaking finger, then stepped back as two guards checked his tag and confirmed he was standing alive in front of them. Before anyone could explain the mistake, another prisoner tore the bottom corner from the list and ran toward the latrine trench. The list appeared after breakfast, when an American clerk carried it from the administration office and pinned it to the wooden notice board beside the camp gate. It was supposed to correct several transport records from the previous week, and most prisoners expected another dull paper about missing property or delayed letters. Otto Weber stopped only because he recognized the number beside the third name, then read the line again and realized the camp had officially recorded him as dead. He did not shout at first, because the shock moved faster than his voice. He placed one hand on the notice board, leaned close to the paper, and checked the spelling, birth year, unit number, and prisoner tag. Everything matched. The list claimed Otto Weber had died during transfer from a rail holding site 3 days before he arrived at Camp Sheridan, which meant the man reading the list should not have existed in the yard. An American guard noticed his face and called the duty sergeant. Within minutes, Otto was standing beside the board while two clerks checked his tag, his intake card, and the numbers stitched into his jacket. Every document on his body proved he was alive, yet the official correction list insisted he was not. Prisoners began gathering behind the guard line, and the quiet error became a public impossibility. Captain Ernst Vogel pushed through the crowd and demanded that Otto step away from the board. He claimed the Americans had confused records before and would fix it eventually, but Otto saw Vogel's hand move toward the lower corner of the paper. Another prisoner, Emil Brandt, moved faster. He ripped the bottom strip from the list and ran toward the latrine trench before anyone understood what he had taken. The yard erupted into motion. Guards chased Emil between the barracks. Otto ran after them without thinking, and Vogel shouted for everyone to stay back. Emil reached the trench, dropped to one knee, and tried to push the torn strip into the mud. A guard caught his collar. Otto grabbed his wrist, and the strip fell open long enough to reveal 3 more names marked with the same word used beside Otto's. The duty sergeant ordered the strip recovered, and both men separated. Emil refused to speak, but his panic exposed something larger than a clerical mistake. The torn section did not list dead men only. It listed men currently living in different barracks, all marked as deceased during the same transfer. Otto watched the guards compare the names, and each confirmation made the crowd press closer to the fence line. The camp commander arrived and ordered the board removed before the prisoners tore it down themselves. Vogel objected loudly, claiming the Americans were hiding their own error. Yet Otto noticed that Vogel never asked why living men had been placed on a death list. He wanted the paper gone, not explained. That difference changed the way Otto looked at him. By noon, Otto, Emil, Vogel, and the 3 listed prisoners had been pulled into the administration building. The commander placed the original list, the torn strip, and the intake files on one table, then ordered every man to state where he had been during the rail transfer. Otto answered first, but before the second prisoner could speak, Emil finally raised his head and said the list was not a mistake, because someone inside the camp had paid him to destroy the bottom names. Subscribe for more forgotten German POW stories like this one. The escalation began when Emil named no one, yet described the payment clearly enough to start a camp-wide search. He said a folded cigarette paper had appeared under his mattress before dawn, promising extra bread if he removed the lower corner of the death list before prisoners noticed the names. The note had been unsigned, but it used a phrase often repeated by the Barak leaders when they wanted men to obey without questions. The commander ordered every Barak inspected while Otto remained in the office under guard. The first search produced nothing except nervous prisoners and overturned bedding, but the second search changed the case. Beneath a loose floorboard in Barak 2, guards found a packet of small paper slips containing names, tag numbers, and short instructions. 3 slips matched the living men marked dead on the notice board. Vogel immediately claimed the slips were planted by prisoners seeking revenge against senior officers, yet the commander ordered his bunk searched next. Vogel protested officer privilege until an American sergeant lifted his mattress and found a pencil wrapped in cloth, sharpened to a needle point, and stained with the same dark ink used on the cigarette note. Vogel said half the camp owned pencils, which was true, but his calm sounded practiced. The real escalation came from the kitchen yard. A prisoner cook approached Otto privately and said extra bread had been disappearing for 2 weeks, always after record corrections were posted. The cook had assumed hungry men were stealing it, but now he remembered seeing Emile receive a wrapped portion from a barrack orderly the night before the list appeared. The payment trail had moved from rumor to food. The commander brought the orderly in for questioning. At first, the man denied everything, then changed his story when the cook identified the wrapping cloth. He admitted delivering bread to Emile, but claimed he never knew why. He had received instructions from a prisoner clerk assigned to help translate German records for the American office. That clerk had access to death lists before they reached the notice board. The records room was sealed immediately. Clerks searched translation tables, waste bins, and file drawers while Otto watched from the hallway. Inside a stack of corrected transfer forms, they found a duplicate list with the same names but different marks. Otto's name had first been marked arrived, then crossed out and replaced with dead in a different hand. The discovery split the camp. Some prisoners feared the Americans had lost control of their own records, while others feared the German internal hierarchy had been rewriting names before the Americans understood what they were seeing. Vogel moved through the crowd again, telling men the investigation would only make mail and transfers worse, but fewer prisoners listened this time. By evening, the prisoner clerk was missing from roll call. Guards found his jacket hanging beside the wash house and his work badge buried under ashes near the stove. Otto realized the clerk had not run from the camp. He had vanished inside it. The death list had already marked living men as dead, and now the first man who could explain the handwriting had disappeared before he could be questioned. The major consequence struck after midnight, when guards found the missing clerk locked inside an unused coal shed behind the infirmary. He was alive, but his hands were tied with torn bedsheet strips, and a wet rag had been stuffed into his mouth to keep him quiet. When the guards pulled him into the light, Otto saw ink stains across his fingers and understood that the man had been forced to write at least part of the false list. The clerk's name was Martin Keller, and he spoke only after the camp doctor checked him. He said Vogel had used him for weeks, first to adjust misspellings, then to delay mail, then to alter status notes on men who had angered the prisoner leadership. Keller claimed he never understood the purpose until he saw Otto's name moved onto the death list. By then he tried to refuse, and that was when he was taken to the coal shed. The consequence widened when Keller identified a ledger hidden inside the chapel supply cabinet. Guards opened the cabinet under witness and found a narrow book wrapped inside altar cloth. The ledger contained 2 columns, one for official camp status and one for internal prisoner status. Some men were marked useful, some difficult, and 4 were marked dead before the American office ever received corrected forms. Otto saw his name in the second column. The word beside it was not only dead, it was replace. Keller explained that certain prisoners with similar ages and units had been swapped on paper so mail, food records, and transfer inquiries could be redirected. A dead man's file could hide a living man, and a living man's identity could be used to protect someone else from investigation. The American commander ordered a complete identity verification. Every prisoner named in the ledger was brought to the yard, checked against tags, intake cards, handwriting samples, and witness statements. The process moved quickly, but each correction exposed another layer of damage. Men had missed letters. Men had lost ration credits. One sick prisoner had been moved away from medical review because his file no longer matched his body. The consequence became personal when Otto's mail packet was opened. 3 letters from his mother had been held under a different spelling, and one official inquiry from the Red Cross had been answered with the word deceased. Otto did not collapse, shout, or weep. He stood very still while the commander read the dates, because for months his family may have believed he was dead while he stood inside the camp waiting for news. Vogel denied knowing anything about family mail, but Keller identified his initials beside several redirected files. The commander ordered Vogel removed from the Barak Leadership Council and placed under separate watch. That decision enraged his followers, who shouted that the Americans were letting a frightened clerk destroy German order inside the camp. The consequence ended with the first open break in prisoner loyalty. Several men who once obeyed Vogel stepped forward and demanded their own files checked immediately. The death list had stopped being Otto's mystery. It had become proof that any man's name could be taken, bent, or buried while he was still alive, and the camp could no longer function until every record was rebuilt in public. The major reversal began the next morning, when Vogel requested a formal statement and claimed he had altered records to protect prisoners, not harm them. He said the false death marks were designed to hide men from old German enemies inside the camp, men who might punish them for cooperation, surrender, or political disloyalty. The explanation stunned the room because it turned him from accused manipulator into a man claiming secret protection. For a short time, the reversal seemed possible. Keller admitted that some men marked dead had been threatened earlier by hardline prisoners. One of the listed men confirmed he had asked for help after being attacked near the wash house. Vogel used that admission immediately, telling the commander that American officials did not understand the dangers inside German prisoner society and that his hidden system had prevented violence. Otto almost believed part of it until the cook brought forward a final piece from the kitchen ledger. Extra bread had not gone to threaten men. It had gone to Vogel's closest followers. The ration trail showed rewards for silence, not protection. The commander ordered the kitchen records laid beside the chapel ledger, and the protective story began to crack. The true reversal came from a prisoner named Franz Dietrich, who had been marked dead 2 weeks earlier and then reassigned to a work detail under another identity. He said Vogel had promised safety, but only if Franz delivered letters, carried warnings, and reported which prisoners complained to the Americans. The false death status had not freed him from danger. It had made him dependent on the man controlling the record. The commander then ordered guards to search the work detail shed connected to Franz's false identity. Inside a toolbox, they found redirected mail, altered tags, and a small stack of inquiry cards from families asking whether their sons were alive. Otto recognized his mother's handwriting on one of the cards and stepped forward before the guard could even call his name. Vogel's reversal collapsed in front of witnesses. He had taken real fear inside the camp and turned it into a private system of control, marking men dead so he could move their files, mail, and labor status without immediate challenge. The men he claimed to protect were alive, but their names belonged to him whenever he needed leverage. The major reversal ended when Keller confessed that Vogel had planned to move Otto onto a farm work detail under a different name within 2 days. Once outside the main camp, Otto's corrected identity would have been harder to prove, and the death notice might have remained active long enough for official confirmation to spread. Otto realized he had not merely found his name on a dead man's list. He had interrupted the process before it swallowed him. The commander ordered every work detail suspended until identities were verified. Vogel was isolated, Keller placed under guard as a witness, and Otto's full file moved to the center evidence table. By sunset, the camp had reversed from asking why Otto was listed dead to asking how many living men had been turned into tools inside a hidden prisoner system. The final irreversible event began with a full camp identity board built across 3 tables in the yard. American clerks pinned official intake cards, corrected names, tag numbers, mail records, and witness statements under each affected prisoner. Every man connected to the chapel ledger had to stand before the board, speak his full name, identify his barack, and confirm whether any mail, food status, work assignment, or medical record had been changed. Otto stood first. The commander read the false death notice aloud, then read the corrected file, the Red Cross inquiry, and the recovered letters from his mother. The words moved across the yard without drama, but they landed harder than shouting. A man who had been written dead now stood before hundreds of prisoners, while every paper proving otherwise was placed in order. The final danger came when Vogel's closest follower tried to disrupt the board. He stepped forward pretending to correct a date, then grabbed Otto's recovered mail and twisted it in his fist. Guards seized him before the paper tore, but the attempt revealed that Vogel's network still wanted specific records destroyed. The commander ordered every document copied immediately and every original sealed in separate packets. That action made the event irreversible. No single stolen page could erase Otto again. No burned ledger could hide the affected names. Copies went to the camp office, regional command, and the mail verification unit. The clerks worked in full view of the prisoners, so everyone could see that the corrected records no longer depended on rumor, trust, or one locked drawer. Then each affected man received a corrected identity card stamped before witnesses. Franz Dietrich received his first, then the sick prisoner whose medical review had been delayed, then the two men from the torn strip, and finally Otto. When the card touched his hand, he looked at the printed name longer than anyone expected, because the paper did something simple but enormous. It gave him back the existence another man had tried to borrow. Vogel was brought past the board under guard. The commander did not allow prisoners to approach him, and Otto did not speak to him. The punishment was visible without violence. Vogel had controlled men by controlling their names, and now every corrected name stood between him and the authority he had built. His followers looked smaller when they realized the records had survived them. The final act came when Otto wrote a new letter to his mother at the evidence table. He did not describe the whole investigation. He wrote that the earlier death notice was false, that his identity had been corrected, and that official confirmation would follow. The commander signed a verification note beneath it, then sealed the envelope in front of the yard. By evening, the dead man's list was replaced by a corrected board. The original false list remained sealed as evidence, but a copy stayed pinned beside the new records with red lines through the errors. Otto walked past it once before lights out and stopped only long enough to read his name in the living column. The irreversible event was not that the lie had been exposed. It was that the truth had been given paperwork strong enough to travel beyond the camp. The next mail truck left at dawn with Otto's letter inside a marked pouch. He watched it pass through the gate while the corrected identity card rested in his jacket pocket. The false list had once made him a dead man in ink, yet the public recount, copied records, and sealed statements had returned him to the world of the living. Behind him, other prisoners lined up before the board to check their own names, and the camp learned that a man could survive the war and still have to fight for proof that he existed. Most people know how World War II ended. Very few know what happened inside these prison camps. Subscribe for more untold WW2 stories.